Come here. Come closer. Yep, that's close enough. What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Red Crimson Gaming here. How y'all guys and gals doing? Hope you all are having a great day. Got a few news for you guys. Actually, two pieces of news for you guys. First up, the Super Mario movie is getting a sequel by, you guessed it, Super Mario World. Yes, that is the name of the new Super Mario movie, Super Mario World, which introduces Yoshi for the first time. And remember, guys, back in the 90s, Super Mario World was a phenomenal 2D Mario game. Actually, I think one of the best Mario games in my book, especially 2D, where they threw everything, all the ideas they had at this game at the time. Phenomenal game, saw gangbusters. So we don't really know if the Super Mario World movie is going to be based off that video game, but I'm pretty sure, if I had to guess, it probably has a lot of major ties to it. I think so. So it comes out April 3rd, 2026. That's next year, guys. I can't believe another Mario movie is coming out next year. It seemed like they was probably working on this Mario movie while they're working the first one, or maybe they already had a story mapped out. They had so many ideas they couldn't cram it into one movie and decided to break it up into two movies or several movies, just in case the movie does do good. And the Super Mario movie did very well. So are you guys excited for the new Mario movie? And expect the same actors that played as Bowser, Mario, and Luigi and Princess to all come back, if I had to take a wild guess. So look for Super Mario World, the movie, the sequel to the original Mario movie, next year. So let's move into more serious news. So Digital Foundry and this Chinese guy, I forgot his name, was just brandishing the Nintendo Switch 2 motherboard, and he broke it down, and the specs are pretty much online for everybody to check out. The specs has been, well, actually I don't want to say a mystery, but Nintendo didn't put the full entire specs out there on the breakdown so everybody could really understand what it's all about. But yeah, so the Switch 2 specs is out there on the internet for everybody to check out, and the specs are pretty underwhelming. A lot of people feel that way. And I took a look at the specs, and they weren't bad, and they definitely weren't great. So the Nintendo Switch 2, we all know, has 12 gigs of RAM. So 9 gigs of RAM will be available to developers to play around with as far as creating games. And the other 3 gigs are allotted to the operating system of a Nintendo Switch. And get this, the chat feature actually dampers the Nintendo Switch 2 performance. And we saw the frame drops and the quality of the image in the Nintendo 2 Direct when they showed the camera feature. Man, it looked choppy and dropped a few frames. It's kind of ballsy and bold for Nintendo to actually show that live, but it is what it is, right? So we know if you have multiple screens up, 3-4 screens, the game is going to be choppy and you might lose some frames. And I thought we were done with that, guys. So expect a lot of people to not even bother with a camera feature. I know a lot of people that's getting a camera, and I know a lot of people that's saying they won't bother with a camera, but they're definitely going to chat with their friends, which is understandable, right? That's what we all used to now with the current consoles, and even dating back to the 360 era. So yeah, the specs seems pretty underwhelming, but we can't go off raw numbers all the time, guys. The Switch 2 is using a modern chip, and with these modern chips, you can do a lot with low performing numbers. It's like numbers are just numbers now. Numbers really doesn't tell the whole story, but it seems like this Switch 2 is just like a magic system, because on paper the specs seem pretty underwhelming, even maybe compared to the Steam Deck if you're just looking at the numbers. But like I said, it's using more modern tech, so that goes a long way. But in practice, the games look amazing. I mean, guys, we're getting Elden Ring, Cyberpunk, and Street Fighter 6 look all phenomenal on the Switch 2. And a lot of those games definitely look better than the Series S games. And as far as what I'm seeing with Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VII is actually up there with the PS5 version, and some shots I've seen look better than the PS5 version, especially the lighting and the ray tracing. But they already stated several months ago, going all the way back to last year, that the Switch 2 is going to have better ray tracing construction than even the PS5. It's using modern tech, guys, and we have to learn not to compare handhelds to consoles. And I know it's kind of hard because they play the same games, and it amazes me how far we've came. Because I started on the Game Boy. I had all the handhelds, the Game Gear, PSP, DS, and we all know the handhelds were always underperforming, going up against the consoles. When it came to handhelds, you know what you were getting with a handheld. You know what you were getting. Nobody ever dared to compare a handheld and its games towards a console. We just know the experience were different on the handhelds. They were tailor-made to the handhelds, and the games were different. And actually, that's the creativity part. That's what I actually liked about handhelds. A game you would play on the console would be different from a game you would play like on the Game Boy, even if it was the same game. Yeah, but back to the Switch 2 specs, guys. So, once again, Nintendo underclocked it. But not by not as much as they did with the OG Switch, because the OG Switch actually used the same Tegra X1 that was in the NVIDIA Shield. And the NVIDIA Shield wasn't, they did not cut that chip down. That chip performed at its highest. So basically, you can honestly say the NVIDIA Shield was, I don't know, I guess probably better than the Nintendo Switch, even though it was using the same chip. I mean, you got a chip. Yeah, you got two of the same chips and two different consoles, but one is using the chip to its full potential on what it was designed to do, and the other console uses the same chip, but it's cut in half. So there you have it. And we've seen Nintendo run into trouble with having the Switch on the clock, and they have went back and actually allowed developers to squeeze more out of the chip. They unlock the chip a little bit so the developers can get more juice out of it. I mean, look at Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, for example. During the load screens, the chip will actually ramp up. The megahertz will go up and the game would load a lot faster. The loading was amazing on the Zelda games for the Nintendo Switch. But I don't know, guys, like, if numbers is anything to go off of, yes, the Switch 2 seems underwhelming, but the games just look great, man. And this is the result of developers designing the game from the ground up for what the system can produce and what the system was made for, its strength and its weaknesses. But the secret sauce here, what everybody's failing to realize, is DLSS is doing the heavy lifting. And people hear what they want to hear and believe what they want to believe instead of believing the facts, even if it's right there in their faces. Nintendo patented their own DLSS. Even Digital Foundry was saying, how can you patent something that it's already there? But Sony, AMD, and Nintendo has their own form of DLSS. But I think the DLSS for the Nintendo Switch is quite special. And that's why they're patented. Nintendo has something going on with their DLSS that they're not sharing and they're not letting the public know. Because in paper, it seems like the Switch 2 was underpowered, but in practice, the games are up there with the PS5. How is that even possible? That's due to the power of DLSS. And we have to understand, and I've never seen any YouTuber mention this, because that's because they don't know. And that comes from not doing research and believing what you want to believe. Actually, DLSS is baked into the Nintendo Switch's 2 hardware, which means it's not an option not to use a DLSS. DLSS is going to be used with every single game that's on the Nintendo Switch. That's how the chipset was designed. It was designed around DLSS baked in. It was designed to use ray tracing and all the features of DLSS, which is boosting frame rates and image quality. So it's not like an option like, oh, you know what? We're not going to use DLSS. They're going to use it because it's baked in. It's like a package deal, right? You go to the store, you buy an item, it comes as a package, right? So everything is there for you to use. That's how the system is designed. Stop acting like DLSS is its own separate thing. It's baked in to the hardware. So automatically it's going to be used for every single game. There's no game on the Nintendo Switch 2 that does not use DLSS. That doesn't make any sense. It's baked into the hardware, so every game is going to use it. And that's why we're seeing the image quality up there with the PS5 and the frame rate as well. That's because of DLSS. Remember, Nintendo's using two forms of DLSS. Their own patented DLSS as well as the NVIDIA patented DLSS, working in unison. And that's what's doing all the heavy lifting. So if DLSS didn't exist and we're just going off the raw specs of the Nintendo Switch 2, yes, they may be in the same situation they were in with the Switch. Underperforming games, image quality, and frame rate. But DLSS is doing all the heavy lifting. We've seen those NVIDIA trailers a year or two ago where they showed off how you can take a 30 FPS game and turn it into a 60 FPS game, a 120 FPS game, a 200 plus frame FPS games, excuse me guys, and image quality. 720p, 1080p, turn it into 4K. Or 720p into 1440p. That's what's going on. So that's why a lot of the games on the Nintendo Switch are pushing 1440p docked and 4K if they wanted to. It all depends on what the devs want to do. If the devs want to push visual fidelity, then expect to see 4K games on the Switch. That's what it was designed for. But they don't have to do that. They can use DLSS, push against a 1440p, and allocate the rest of resources to pushing 60 FPS or better, 120 FPS. And that's why we're able to see 120 FPS in handheld mode. And speaking of handheld mode, here comes the bad news. Now I'm hearing that the Switch 2 dock isn't using the 2.1 HDMI. Now I heard it's a 2.0. I don't know how true that is, but that's the news people are running with. And I'm not going to run with that, but that's what they're saying. Maybe I should have done my research before I hopped on the camera, but I'm not signing off on it. So technically that doesn't even count. But I'm hearing that they're using the older HDMI, which kind of doesn't really make any sense because even a year ago with the rumors, they said it was 2.1. So I don't know how they scale back and all of a sudden it's 2.0. I don't really know. So it seems like Nintendo, if this is true, they're pushing more emphasis on the handheld mode performance over the docked mode. And we all know docked, the system is more powerful because it can use its full strength without losing power because it's connected to a power source. Where in the opposite, in the handheld mode, it's running off the battery, so they can't utilize its full potential because we're going to get 30 minutes, an hour of gameplay. It's bad enough if Switch 2 is going to play AAA games at 2 hours. That's pretty pathetic, really. But I guess they cheaped out on the battery. I think they're using a 20-watt battery. That's crazy. Even the Steam Deck and the Base Rock Ally, I think, has 40-watt battery. So if they stick a 40-watt battery in there, we would have gotten double that, 4 hours, which is cool for a AAA game, honestly, in handheld mode. I mean, maybe we might get that with the next Switch 2, man. But it seems like Nintendo just, if judging by the specs that's on paper, they dropped the ball again. And maybe later on, a couple years down the line, 2, 3, 4 years from now, the Switch 2 might struggle with current gen games. I don't know. But we'll have to wait and see. I'll reserve my judgment until I actually have the Switch 2 in my hands and I'm playing it. You know, we just got to go off of the games. We have to go off of what we see on the TV screen, not on a piece of paper. Because right now, honestly, in the time and age we're living in, like numbers are just numbers. Numbers really doesn't mean anything. And even back then, developers just use numbers just to make it seem like their system is a powerhouse and it's better than the competition system because they want you to buy these systems. But we're at a point now where numbers are really insignificant. Just like teraflops is insignificant, it's not showing the full picture. It's just numbers they'll throw around to make it seem like they got a better console in the competition. But really, we've came so far in technology, you can take. I think I don't get me wrong. I forgot what Intel processor it is, but you have like uh a 8 core processor that may outperform a 16. Uh, 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 I hope I'm saying this right, but you have processors that has less cores that outperforms a CPU with more cores, and that's proven fact. If you guys have PC and understand how PC works, that's a proven fact. And how is that even possible? Because you would think the more cores are better, right? But no, not really. As technology gets better, they can find a way how to make things run more efficiently and better without using without using a lot of power. You get what I'm saying? Remember how the Game Gear use what was it 8 batteries and you would get like an hour and a half of playtime. And then look at the Nintendo Switch OLED. You and even the red box model, you're getting anywhere from like 6 to 8 hours, man. You get what I'm saying? So technology has come a far way where chips are more efficient now. The numbers don't really mean anything anymore. You can pack a 16. You can pack the power of a 16 core into an eight core processor. They make processors like every couple of months, every year, guys. So you don't think they figured it out how to give you more with less. And when I'm looking at the Switch 2, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what they've done. So if you think about it, it's really genius on Nintendo's behalf as well as Nvidia because developers, if you watch those developer interviews, the developers voice something new that Nintendo started, which is cool. They say the Switch 2 is powerful. Unless they're getting paid a lie. But that's just the age we're living in, man. These chips are so advanced, they can give you more for less. That in itself is amazing. But in all honesty, specs aside, DLSS is what's doing all the heavy lifting, guys. Nvidia has been showing us trailers for a couple of years now. They showed you how they can turn a 30 FPS game into a 60 FPS game, 60 FPS game into a 200 FPS game, a 480p game into 1080p, and 1080p into 1440p, and the 4K. They showed us that. And the DLSS is doing all the heavy lifting. That's all it is. So it's not even, it's not magic. So with this news of the specs of a Nintendo Switch 2 being underwhelming, is it going to sway your decision of buying the system, or you're still going to buy the system, what you have in your hands, and then you make your final judgment? I mean, at first, yes, the news was really underwhelming. Like, I don't understand why Nintendo even went with 12 gigs of RAM. Why didn't they just go with 16 as a standard? I mean, this is 2025, but like I said, when I think about it, I mean, RAM is really important, but when I think about it, it still goes back to what I even said. They figured out how to give us more for less. Because you got to think, the current gen consoles have 16 gigs of RAM. The Steam Deck is 16 gigs of RAM, but yet still, they're playing console level games with the same frame rates. So, think about that. And the Switch has 12 gigs of RAM with 9 gigs of RAM for the developers to play around with and 3 gigs of RAM that's left over for the operating system. And they're still showing us games like Elden Ring, Street Fighter 6, and Cyberpunk. That's freaking amazing. But yeah, guys, let me know in the comment section what you think about the news. Thanks for your support. And you know what will make me happy? You guys liking and subscribing. Peace. See y'all next video.